everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How to Build a Budget for Your Lifestyle. My name is Kelly Blount, and I'm the Program Marketing Specialist here at General Electric Credit Union. We're so glad you've joined as we have a lot of great content ahead, and we wanted to thank you all for tuning in from the comfort of wherever you may be today. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn things over to Todd Moore, the Director of Education with Trinity Debt Management, to introduce himself and take us through today's topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Great to be with everyone and great to be back working with the credit union. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today, we have a great topic and I'm excited to work with everyone. Today, how we build a budget for your lifestyle. You know, one of the things that's great about this conversation today is that we get to think about the future. All of us on the call today, we're in different places. We have different goals, different priorities, but I would hope that all of us share the idea that we can always improve and that we're looking to plan for the future. So very timely topic as we start this new year and work to prioritize our goals and objectives for the year. So at the heart of this conversation is really using a budget effectively to prioritize our time and resources and to really reach those overall goals that we may have. When we think about our lifestyle, many of us, we may have a whole range of different things that we're looking to achieve. We'll talk about some of those things today, but as we start this work, it's very, very important that I challenge you to think about, you know, what is it now that you're really planning in this coming year? And as we move through the slides, you'll see that we'll be thinking about not only our short-term goals, but some of our longer-term goals as we envision the type of lifestyle that we really want to achieve, not only for ourselves, but for our family and even leaving wealth behind. So again, at the heart of this conversation is really how do we structure a budget? How do we put the pieces together so that we can best use our time and resources? And then secondly, taking a look at our budget, how can we better understand ourselves? So much of what we do is tied to our behavior. And I love talking about that topic. I don't know if anyone joined us on the psychology of spending, but we really got into some details. I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at that, some of the biases that we may have, some of the things that psychologically may affect the way we do the work. So I encourage you to go back and maybe take a listen to some of those details. But when we think about budgeting, the great thing about this topic is that if we're looking to accomplish big things and to have that lifestyle that we want, we really do need to understand something about ourselves and our overall habits. And you'll learn a lot along the way by putting together a budget and understand a lot about your own choices and how we may either align our values and our money to our objectives or certain things that we just need to correct. So we'll be talking about those, the positives, the things that we're doing well, and then we'll also be thinking about maybe some of the habits that we can change so that we can really create that lifestyle that we all want. And part of that is maybe changing some of our habits. Just a moment. So there are any number of different reasons why we would want to put together a budget, okay? Now, I mentioned earlier, we think about these big goals, we're envisioning the future, okay? And for many of us, some of us on the call, we might want to live debt-free. Some of us are thinking about retirement. I'm certain that there's going to be folks that maybe are younger families that are thinking about maybe reducing their debts or becoming a homeowner. Some of us may be mid-careerists and thinking about going back to school or strengthening our overall skills. So, and we also may be thinking about that point in life where we're thinking about retirement and ways to go about using a budget more effectively to reach some of our retirement goals. So there are numerous benefits from doing this type of work. I'll be tying it today in many ways to the life cycle, and I'll present those slides to you from a planning perspective. But I think for our purposes, one of the first things that we want to think about before we get into the actual budget itself is to really sit down and think about how this will prepare us for major life events. I talked about earlier having a clear sense of our financial goals. So I would ask you, what are your priorities? Have you sat down and written those out? And I think there's a lot of value in writing out what our priorities are. I'm a big proponent of actually having some type of written plan. I like to see things on paper. Talking about things is one thing, but actually putting together a budget, having those goals outlined, and having those goals on paper, that's where we actually start to specify and figure out what dollar amounts need to go towards those overall goals, what our target dates are, and really specify what we're trying to accomplish. We can talk about budgeting, but if we're not putting those pieces together, we don't arrive at the outcomes. We don't know when we're going to do it. We don't know how much it's going to cost us. We don't even have a target date. So what I'm going to challenge you to do as we dream big today and think about our overall objectives and plan that future lifestyle, we want to think about where you want to be in the next 5 years. Okay, where is it right now that you can have the most impact on your life in the next 5 years by establishing a budget and planning for those major life events? So if you're a younger person, you may be thinking about, building credit, paying off some debt, creating an emergency fund. Today's conversation is going to be perfect for you because here we're able to work with the credit union to get the types of loans that we need to create and structure a budget, use our income and our time wisely to meet those overall goals. For others, we may own a home. We may be thinking now, where do I want to be 10 years from now? Where is it that am I trying to accelerate the loan repayment? Am I trying to free up some money so I can go back to school? And then for others, we want that longer term plan where we're making some investments now, looking to increase that income, retirement income, or maybe put more money. My children now are kind of in elementary school. Can I increase, a 529 savings goal, an education savings plan, something like that? Again, the challenge here is for you to really sit down and think about what you want to measure. That is, your overall financial goals need to be measurable. And then how much money can we align to reach that goal and the target date? So a budget is our tool that we're going to use to reach those types of goals. Now, here's where I think want to kind of structure our conversation around what we call a life cycle, the planning model, okay? So this first stage, when we think about the planning model, is we're in the wealth building stage. Now, for many of this, you'll see this represented on the next slide, but we can break this into our age groups, so depending where we're at in our age and our life cycle, this is where we start to see in these early years, we're in the wealth building stage. So that implies a lot. This is, the dream of home ownership, having better credit, strengthen our credit capacity, reducing debts, those sorts of things. Stage 2 is, you're working, you've matured, maybe you've matured even in your own career. We're looking to accelerate wealth, and we're trying to make the shift in our budget so that it reflects in perhaps savings goals, maybe paying off some of our student loan debts, accelerating some of our other debts. So you'll start to see, hopefully, that if we're doing this work correctly, or from a planning perspective, that we want where we're at now in our life cycle to be aligned with the stages of growth. Okay, so as we move into this latter stage, this is where we're really thinking about maybe continuing down that path of having our income grow through investments in our retirement fund, but also sharing what we've earned and what we've built through our lifetime with others as we think about retirement and estate planning. So here's where we get into this visual of just kind of thinking about what the life cycle looks like and kind of where we're at through time. You can see the different age brackets listed at the bottom. And as we move through these 3 large stages of wealth building, being a younger person and building a family, and the types of things that I hope that you will build into your budget as we make our transition through this life cycle. We'll be talking about those things, not only from a planning perspective about maybe some of the shortcomings that you don't have in your budget, or things that we need to focus more on, 529s, retirement goals, those sorts of things. Those all shift through time. And I really like this graphic because it really lays out, I think, how to take this work and apply it within a model where you can see that the choices that you have now, does it fit within this model? Does it help us make the type of choices that we need to build wealth and to arrive at a lifestyle where we're aligning our funds towards the types of products and services and choices that we need to be successful? So it's a great model to use and to think about how we can best use our time and resources and align our money towards the things that we need to grow wealth through time. So I wanted to give you a couple examples here, thinking about alignment and where we're at in our planning needs. You go back to the previous slide, you start to see these age brackets and then moving our way through that timeline through the life cycle. So, you think about the younger years, most of us are in that part where, you may be having a family, managing a new family, then what types of choices are you making right now? What are your priorities? So if you think about your budget, we have income and expenses. We're trying to manage our expenses. We'll show you those tools in a moment, but there's other things that maybe you should be thinking about, maybe starting an education fund for children, making certain that you're aligning savings goals, those sorts of things. But when we think about these larger areas of our lives, these are the kind of things we want to focus on for our overall planning needs. And you can see there's a whole range of items here, so depending where we're at within our age bracket, what we're hoping to do is show some alignment between where we're at now and then how we align our resources to meet some of these larger goals. Working parents, 35 to 44, upgrading career training, establishing retirement goals, continuing to build a children's education fund. I've talked a little bit about 529. We've done some 529 work. If you see future presentations where we talk about 529 savings accounts, I want to encourage you to align that work towards your to your budget so that you can best meet your overall long-term education needs. Has some wonderful tax advantages to it as well. So I encourage you to take a look at the 529 plans and maybe go back and review some of our prior webinars. And then I'm kind of in this midlife bucket at this point where I'm working on investments for myself in my retirement, continuing to pay down debts, certainly assisting with higher education for children. And then again, just those folks who may be on the call that are in the pre-retirement stage or heading towards retirement. If you have questions about better aligning your budget to meet these types of goals, I want to encourage you to work with the credit union and work with some of the folks that are part of the network of GE Credit Union so that you can best meet your overall retirement plan. So those are the types of things when we think about where we're at in the life cycle. Lots of examples there, lots of choices that we can make. Okay, so the question now becomes, how do we actually structure a budget? How do we create a budget that's going to help us actually do the work? Okay, and this is where I think it's important, again, that we start to choose a budget method that's best for you. And when it comes to personal finance, you really need to make a choice about what you feel motivated towards. I'll show you several different budgets, but again, depending on life cycle, one of these budgets may or may not work best for you, and I'll explain that here in a few moments. But I've listed 4 factors here, thinking about a budgeting method. You think about our overall financial goals, our spending habits, how you're paid weekly, bi-weekly. Some folks are paid even monthly. Which one of these budgets is going to best meet that particular goal? And then just your personal preferences. Are you prepared to have a budget that's very tight or one that is a little looser in its method? Okay, so it's important as we go through the next several slides to think about not only your goals and how you may align some of those goals to with your income and expenses, but choosing the right method so that you can be successful. It's very important that you choose the right method so you're able to maintain and stick with that budget through time. So the first budget that I'll introduce to you is the 50-30-20. Now, we've talked about this before. So this is a big picture budget. It's kind of loose in its details. This one became popular and it continues to be popular because it creates these spending categories, but it also lays out some nice percentages for us. Okay, so you think about income and expenses. That's going to be fundamental to all the budgets that I'll present, income minus expenses. So this is looking at, of your income, about half of your income is in required expenses. Okay, this would be things like your rent, your utilities, insurance, things like that. Okay, and then it automatically sets a 20% savings goal. Ideally, it would take your income and say, okay, we want 20% going towards some type of savings goal. Then at least 30% towards discretionary spending, which means you make the choice on how you want to spend those funds, whatever that may be. So it's nice because the 50-30-20 gives you a nice visual of how to take, your income, break it into these percentages, and get you started along the way. Now, it doesn't spell out specific details for you. So this again takes us back. Think for a moment where you're at in the life cycle. Are you in that younger group? Where are you at? Are you midlife? Where are you at in the life cycle? The question then becomes, as we go through the next series of slides, is this the budget for me? Do I need to get started on a budget? Am I a little more sophisticated? This one is loose. It's kind of broad, so if you're just getting started, this is a great starting point. Gets you into the habit of budgeting and get you thinking about how to best use your time, your resources, your money. But again, depending how specific you are on your overall plan at this point, this may not be the budget for you. And for those who are, budgeting regularly, I would say, we'll get a little bit more complicated and specific about the budget as you see here soon. But 50-30-20, it's a great way to get started, particularly for younger families and for those who are struggling at this point, maybe to have a savings goal and just trying to figure out how to structure a budget. Great starting point along the way. Great point to get started, just working your way through a budget. Now, the money flow budget. This one, I'm a big fan of this particular budget. The way this works, this is an automated approach to budgeting, and it has so many benefits. Now, again, what we're doing here is we're looking for reoccurring expenses. So this would apply best to a person thinking about those factors that I talked about earlier, income, your pay. When we have reoccurring expenses, we're trying to target dates, dollar amounts. This is a budget that folks are comfortable budgeting. They know they have consistent income. They know when their bills are all due. The idea is now that we've got, stability, we can set it and forget it. That is, we align our income, our recurring expenses, and we set up a payment structure so that things are pulled automatically from our account. Okay, everything is done. Everything is set in automation. It's a great tool. Okay, but again, is it for you? Is this the right budget for you? So, there's all sorts of variation. If you have seasonal employment, or if your income is inconsistent, it's very tough to set up an automated budget when the income, is not consistent through time. Or maybe it's dependent on working together with a spouse or a significant other, and there's some budgeting problems where you just don't work well together. Money flow budget is not for you. You might want to just use a simpler 50-30-20 approach just to set something up, get something started, have some priorities, and use that approach. But for those who are budgeting regularly, your income's consistent, this is where this can really become an incredibly valuable tool, thinking about how we arrive at the future lifestyle that we envision. So just give you a couple examples, if we're thinking about, again, going back to that life cycle idea, you want to become a homeowner and you're working your way through the process, your income's consistent. got some savings that you're working towards. Your priority right now is to create some closing costs and some funds for closing costs and have some money for down payment. Maybe it's not going to be 20%, but we want something to bring to the table. This is an outstanding way to get there, okay? Because here we set a dollar amount. We have a time frame that we're looking towards. We can use the money flow to pull that into an account. We can set it, forget it. Our savings goal more or less becomes a reoccurring expense. It allows us to plan that item through time. Okay, so it's a wonderful tool. Others on the call, you may think about, again, I've mentioned 529 a couple different times. Automation is a great way to get there. Not only will you get the tax benefits from it, but here where we can set that as 529 becomes a reoccurring expense. It's that education expense. We set it, we forget it. All sorts of variations on this theme. This could be used for emergency savings. This could be used to, for future retirement goals. But this requires you to do some work up front. Okay. Again, the question is this particular approach right for you? And, I'll encourage you to go back and take a look at those factors and just see, kind of work your way through that list and think about how you may use this budget. But the question really is it right for you? I love this budget. I think it's very effective. And sometimes you have to kind of move your way into this particular approach. Get started budgeting, get a little more comfortable doing there, make the changes to your habits. And then once you get to this stage, you can really accomplish some outstanding financial goals by using this particular approach. Anti-budget. This is kind of interesting. So if you notice here, there's no percentages listed here. It doesn't lay out, it doesn't give us recommended percentages about savings goals or discretionary spending, things like that. But this is also a minimalist approach to budgeting. What we're doing here is we're setting a savings goal and then focusing on just meeting our overall, our utilities, our living expenses. So when we think about income and expenses, what's different from this particular approach, anti-budget, and the 50-30-20, is in the prior budget, 50-30-20, there's percentages. Here, what we're saying is it's basically up to you. You have a lot of movement here. That is, once you've met some type of savings goal and you're at least paying your overall living expenses, the rest is up to you to spend by priority. So that does require some work. You now have to, again, set priorities. The question is, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What are your goals? How are we going to get there? So anti-budget, or just spending by priority, what this is really intended to do is to get you to sit down and think about what your priorities are. Is it debt management? Is it improving my credit? Is it, having more money for leisure, travel? It can be any number of those things. Again, are those the best choices to meet where you're at in your life cycle? And secondly, if you're thinking about priorities such as travel and leisure, if I make those my priorities, am I able to arrive at these lifestyle choices that I may have, that I may be planning for 5 to 10 years in the future? So there's going to be some tension between some of these other items, travel, leisure, versus other things that may be more significant for a financial plan. Planning for future college expenses, maybe going back to school, those sorts of things. So where this is important is to really, again, while it's a minimalist approach, its importance is that it forces you to confront priorities. And there's a lot of value in that. Once we start to see the trade-offs among various choices and what those costs would mean, the idea is that it forces us to really shift our priorities so that we can arrive at better outcomes. But at minimum, we meet our overall expenses, we create some type of savings goal, which you define, there's no percentage, and then among competing priorities, we have to figure out what do we want to accomplish. So again, is this the right budget for you? Will it help you meet your overall goals? That's really the question that we want to continue to ask ourselves as we work our way through some of these various models. The last one that I'll show you today is what we call zero-sum budget. So what we're looking at here is, again, going back to that concept of income and expenses. Within this budget, income minus expenses equals zero. Okay, so here every dollar has a destination. Okay, so we think about all of our categorized expenses, and unlike any of the other budgets that I've presented to you, this one is going to be the most demanding, but it's also the one that has the potential for big outcomes. Okay, so this particular budget is, again, think about those factors that I showed you: income, when you might get paid, various priorities. This is one where we're working with folks who are very comfortable with working their way through a budget. In many ways, I would say they have few debts at this point. This is a more sophisticated budget because this one, in this particular case, it requires you to have very specific categories. There's so many things that we want to accomplish with the income that we have, okay? And again, tying it back to life cycle, if I'm a younger person and I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to try the zero-sum budget today. I want every dollar to have a destination. But if I have high debt, I'm trying to build my credit, I'm not a homeowner, still have significant car loan debt, those sorts of things, and then I'm trying to focus on investments and all this other sort of stuff for retirement, you can probably see that there's going to be, that's really not a compatible budget at that point. It's probably not the right approach. In fact, it's not the right approach. We need to focus on a different budget to do that type of work. But for others, this becomes a tool that can have tremendous outcomes, because if you're comfortable with budgeting, you've shifted some of your behavior, made those types of choices where your spending plan is aligned, and you want now to get into the details where you can actually specify with dollar amounts, and have very specific goals. Doing this type of approach can be very, very helpful. Again, I'll talk about some of these larger goals, but I mean, you may be thinking about, in this particular case, just saying, okay, I want more money going to retirement. I'm at midpoint in the life cycle. I'm somewhere between 45, 50. I really want to get specific about this. I really have neglected in some of my earlier years, some of my retirement planning. Now I really want to get, it's time for me to get serious about this. I'm running out of time. Zero-sum budget is a great tool for that. And whether you're looking at maybe even some changes to your insurance and those sorts of things, great tool. Education, paying off certain expenses. Again, lots of variation on that theme, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is every dollar has a destination. So those are the 4 budgets that I have planned for you today. Again, think about the life cycle that we talked about, where you're at this point in time, what your goals are, and then which one of these 4 budgets do you believe will best meet your needs and overall goals. So the next challenge for us as we think about how to do this work and plan for the future lifestyle, those things that we envision, is I'm going to encourage you to really start tracking expenses. Now, this takes us back to where I talked about shifting behavior, okay? Again, our budget is the tool that we use to align goals and objectives, dollar amounts, and just get into the details and how to do the work. The next challenge that I think is important for us is to choose a method, a tracking method, so that we can shift behavior. Keeps us focused on our overall expenses, and then it also requires us to to take a look at our overall spending patterns and behavior. Can we meet our budget if we're not tracking? I would say that while we have a budget in place without tracking, I think it's easy to really overstate, what is happening through a budget. I really believe in tracking expenses. I know personally it does a lot for my own personal finances because it's so easy for me to get off track with things with the kids or with groceries, or just things like coffee, which I hate to admit. I do enjoy going to Starbucks. I like espresso. So, these are all things that are personal, but you're going to have things that are personal to you. And that's where you got to find a method that actually works for you. Um, I've listed lots of different things here. You can do this. I'm going to show you various ways and also talk to you about some tools online that you can use through the credit union. But at the end of the day, what we're really looking at is, looking at our overall expenses, looking for patterns within our overall expenses. What are we doing? What are we purchasing? And how often are we doing certain things? So we want to categorize that so we start to see patterns. And this is any number of things we can look at, entertainment, transportation, all sorts of things. You're just looking for what's unique to you. Um, and all of us will have certain spending patterns because we have certain behaviors. So, if it works for you and you don't want to use something online, worksheet method works fine. What you want is an item, a dollar amount, and a date. And then we track those items. You really want to do this at minimum for 30 days. I'm going to encourage you to do it, for about 90 days. Hopefully habits will start to change by then. You'll start to see patterns within your expenses and you can make those corrections. But what we're looking for here is, if I do this exercise and I can save myself $50, $100 a month, that's $50 or $100 a month that I could use for debt repayment. It's $100 a month that I could be putting into, a 529 savings plan or putting $100 extra into my retirement. So we're looking for those incremental changes that will have long-term impact. So again, if you want to go into your account, into your bank account and start looking for some of those patterns in your spending, things that you purchased over the last month, you can build a spreadsheet. You can do the worksheet method. We've included through the credit union some worksheets that you can use to track expenses. So those will be available after the presentation. You'll be able to get those online. And then we'll also show you ways to do the work through the credit union to track your overall expenses. But one of the things, again, that's most important about this is that we see a change in behavior. That is, rather than maybe going to the grocery store, 4 times a week, I've got a budget that's aligned to what I can afford for groceries. We're not making multiple trips, making that one change rather than 4 trips to the grocery store. Now I can save at minimum, $100 a month, or changing the way that I purchase my lunches and on and on. There's so many examples. Each of us will have that unique moment that we say, wow, this is an area where I can just see through my categorized expenses. This is an area where I can easily change, direction and hopefully save some money and then tie that money towards one of our overall long-term goals. Okay. So talked about various methods to do that. Let's talk about the General Electric Credit Union Money Management Tool. So this is something that you have available to you now that you can use. This is online for those who have not used it. I'm going to give you a nudge now, and hopefully that you will do that. But I've had a chance to kind of look through the tool myself. I just want to encourage you and make you aware of it if you're not using it. So, this does a lot. You can have custom alerts. It auto generates a budget on your spending habits. See all your bills in one place. Set reminders. So we talk about the automated budget. You can tie this into that plan. You can set reminders for savings goals. You can see investments all in one place. continue to monitor your overall net worth, your investment goals. So mainly what I want to do is just point this out to you, for tracking expenses or just making a more effective budgeting process. Not using this tool, I think, is a shortcoming. It certainly will help you. If you feel that this is not the approach for you, at minimum, get into your account, categorize expenses, even if you're just using something like pen and paper, but we're looking for those patterns, looking to shift behavior, and then using those funds that we find to make better choices and align to our budget. So the GE Money Management Tool, please guys, take a look at that. I think it'll be very helpful for you. So let's shift for a moment and just think about how we plan. We've talked in the first part, just planning and envisioning some of our overall goals, where we want to be in the future. Talked about the life cycle. So as we know, the best plans often come with unexpected turns. So, there's so many things that can happen in major life events: job losses, unexpected pregnancy, sicknesses, something that happens to our health. It goes on and on. So there's always risk. There's always risk involved. Living involves risks, and it involves challenges to our personal finances. So what we want to do is we want to have some approach in place where we can plan for future expenses or plan for those risks. Okay. I want to share, you guys that have been on call with me before, presentations, and probably know I love to share some statistics with you from out in the field. So I'm going to do that now. But this was from the Bankrate Emergency Savings Survey, I believe. That was done in 2024, early this year. And again, along that theme of just planning for unexpected experiences, for expenses. So about 1,200 people were randomly surveyed asking this. Many of us on the call know that we're still in a very high inflationary period. So the question was, if you suddenly had to spend cash for an unexpected expense, how would you cover the cost? So a couple of these, statistics here for you, 44%. If they had to pay for an emergency expense of $1,000 or more, that becomes a challenge. And certainly I know with many of the folks that I work with at Trinity, because of inflation and just using credit cards to supplement income, $1,000 emergency expense would be a tremendous challenge for many families. So it's very much, I think, in line with that statistic. And then looking at savings, 35% of the people said that they would have to, borrow to pay $1,000 expense. They just don't have that in savings at this point. And then others, if you were to lose a job, 2 in 3 would be worried about having enough to cover a month's living expenses. So, we've talked a lot about emergency savings and really being able to plan for hardships or those risks that will come your way. Those statistics, they really support, the need to do this work. So when we think about using a budget to plan for the unexpected, I'm going to encourage you again to create a line within your budget, a line item that says we've got a reoccurring expense towards, creating some type of emergency savings. Okay. So if you think back, all 4 budgets had some type of savings goal. The question for you right now is, what can we do to create some type of quantifiable savings goal? How much money do we have to put towards an overall savings goal? Start small. Incremental is going to be, the process I would encourage you to use. Again, among all of our expenses, we think about how we create this fund. Sometimes it can be overwhelming trying to think about how we create one more line item in a budget. But if we can automate that process, okay, if we can set up a separate account, automate the process, that I think it takes a little of the pressure off of us. Rather than seeing it as an expense, we can just automate the process. You can use a credit union account to do that. You can use the GE Money Management Tool to do that. But the idea is that we want this to be a reoccurring expense, set up a separate account, and allow that money to filter in to kind of just incrementally build that account through time. Start small. The idea is that we have something. The prior example was $1,000. Oftentimes we hear, okay, well, you should have 3 months. Well, for many of us right now, because of all the other challenges with inflation and student loan debts and other sorts of debts, that may be too much. And maybe, 3 months expenses just maybe isn't feasible to cover that. But think about that example that I gave you, $1,000. That's something that we should be able to reach. And we want to reach that goal through time. So, really think about the account and how we set something up and to automate that process so that it becomes simple and that we build that through time. Other ways to think about this, again, and I've talked a little bit about this, is that, here we're at tax time. If you do have any kind of opportunity to use some of your taxes to put that in to savings, try to challenge yourself to put some percentage of that away to build that emergency savings fund. Even if it's a couple $100, something that you put there in addition to treating it as a predictable monthly expense. You can use payroll to do this as well. If you don't want to use the your account through the credit union, you can always do this through payroll deduction. So incrementally through payroll deduction to build the fund. And then you might also think about savings differently. Maybe you have some funds already built into emergency savings. Now what we might think about is a savings goal might be, again, treating it as a reoccurring expense in our budget, thinking long-term, and putting more money into 401k or an IRA. Again, what type of lifestyle do we want in the future? What do we envision? This is an incremental way for us to get there. So I will tell you, and I'll encourage you also to attend any of the webinars that have something to do with retirement planning. I'm certain that folks will tell you on the call that 401k is just underutilized. So right now, let's say that you're not, putting money towards the 401k match or the full match. If you really want to think about savings in this coming year, I want to encourage you to do that. I know personally, when I've worked with financial planners in the field, it's an area that I continually see underinvestment in the 401k. So just wanted to share that with you. And hopefully it's another way for us to thinking about building, long-term savings or emergency savings. Now, secondly, let's think about this. As we plan for the future, we want to keep our credit utilization low. We don't want to go out and continue to borrow more and more funds. We know that things do happen. If you get into a situation where you need to have a line of credit, our goal through our budget and to meet our lifestyle, I think, should really be paying down our overall debts. But occasionally these things do come up where we have a hardship. If something comes up that you need a line of credit, I want to encourage you to talk with the credit union and let folks know what your overall needs are and how there may be products and services that will best meet your needs. So don't hesitate to reach out to the credit union if you find yourself in that situation. But otherwise, we're looking at just reducing or just not using credit. We want to bring that credit down as low as possible, that we're not becoming more and more reliant on using credit to supplement our overall income. That's a challenge for many of us right now as we struggle with inflation. But we do want to try to keep, as we're planning for the future, trying to keep that credit utilization low. We may be looking at second job or some way to increase our overall income. The reason I point this out is credit card debt is at an all-time high, and I've talked about this in other presentations, but we have record credit card debt nationally, and part of that, again, is just using it as supplemental income. It's something longer term that the more debt we have, the harder it is for us to arrive at paying that off and meeting our overall goals. So encourage you to try to utilize, keep that utilization low as we move through time. A couple examples here, typically on credit card debt, we're looking at 30%, but just our overall, our debt load, how much we're carrying right now, particularly if you're thinking about aligning goal with home ownership. we want to try to bring down our overall expenses 28% of our pre-tax income, and then our overall debt obligations. Sometimes it's referred to as front end and back end ratios. We won't go into that today, but it's basically looking at your income and making certain that, somewhere around these ratios, we're not overwhelmed with our overall debt. Okay. So a great goal for us as we think about the future is getting some of that debt down this year. Accelerating loan repayment. This is another thing that we may think about this year, or maybe even a 5-year goal, accelerating some type of loan that you currently have. This could be done through any number of different loans, but let's say that your car loan at this point, you want to pay that off, at least accelerate that down from a 5-year time frame down to 3. You want to save a little extra money and roll that money forward so that you can meet some other goal to help you become successful in the future. Think about a loan acceleration repayment plan of some sort. And then we've talked about credit cards, so I won't go into that too much. But again, just trying to keep those balances, pay those balances down, or don't utilize more than 30% of your overall credit line. And then lastly, when we think about hardships, and this is one that I consistently see that's overlooked. And I'll just kind of go through this one quickly, and then we'll take some questions. But as we're planning for the future, and this is something that I see regularly working with clients here at Trinity and just looking at budgets broadly, there's not enough emphasis really on insurance planning. So I would encourage you to really pay attention to any of the webinars that are offered that talk about insurance planning. Insurance is about risk management. That's at its core. That's what we're talking about. So whether it's healthcare, disability, some type of homeowners or renters insurance, life insurance, I will tell you, very, very few folks that I work with really pay much attention to this type of planning. Many of the young folks that I work with, particularly young families, they really don't have any real term or whole life plan. I mean, at minimum, if you're a parent and you don't have some type of term life insurance plan, God forbid something happened to you and what you would leave behind to take care of your children, for a very modest cost, you can purchase a term plan and have that become part of your budget and have, some funds to help your loved ones. So these are just some of the things for insurance planning. Again, really keep your eye open for any of the future webinars, but in your budget, if you really want to plan for the unexpected and mitigate those future risks, these are 4 areas that I believe are consistently overlooked in budgets and long-term plans that need to be aligned to lifestyle, okay, and where you're at this point in time. So I encourage you to speak with the folks at the credit union to really put you in contact with some folks that can sit down and look at your overall income, your expenses, and then think about, maybe adding this in is one of those areas that's too often overlooked in a budget. So covered a lot of ground today, and we'll just summarize this quickly, and then I'll open up to any questions that you may have. Again, encourage you to envision the future. That's what's exciting about a call like this. It's what makes me excited to work with so many people over the years, is being able to use a budget to help them align and meet the lifestyle that they want. A budget is going to be a wonderful tool. We've shown you 4 different approaches to that theme, but it allows you to set that realistic timeline and align those goals. As I've said earlier, really sit down, write out your priorities and your goals. And let's try to use our budget to align some real numbers to those overall goals and set specific dates and timelines when we want to do those types of things. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? What does that plan really mean? Think about where you're at in the life cycle and how are you aligned with some of those priorities, kind of where you should be and what type of planning approaches you should be taking right now. Make that plan real, write it down, put some numbers behind it, and use your budget to help you get there. There's a lot of literature that talks about leveraging technology and financial tools. The credit union has a great one. I talked about that earlier through the GE Money Management tool. But leverage payroll or the money management tool, let's really use some technology. If that's appealing to you, that's great. I tend to lean and say that it is. But at the end of the day, make certain that your budget is aligned to some type of savings or investment strategy. Again, talk with the credit union if you are kind of at that midpoint and you've done some work and you're looking to go to maybe a zero-sum budget and really put some additional funds. Speak with the credit union. We've got some great partners that can help you do that. And then lastly, I can help you to establish a budget and work with the credit union to help you align a financial plan to meet your overall goals. That's a free resource. Be glad to help you do that. And all you really pretty much need to do is give me a call. Here's my contact information. Let me know that you were on the webinar, and I'd be glad to work with you. So Kelly, that is it for today. I'll take questions. And again, I appreciate everyone's time and thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you, Todd. There were a few questions that came through during the webinar, so let's go ahead and jump into those. The first one being, do you have any advice for creating a budget for an income that fluctuates?
Yeah, fluctuating income. So in this particular approach, I'm not sure how wildly it fluctuates, but let's just say that we've got, maybe you're working some overtime, we're trying to plan a budget. I would say at minimum, let's go with something aligned to that 50-30-20. The key here, which is more important even than the percentages, is that we have something written down. Okay, so we want to make some assumptions on your income and expenses. I will tell you, I work a lot with folks who have fluctuating income. Some folks are working, second jobs, overtime, their income. It just isn't consistent. Okay, it fluctuates in terms of the hours applied and what their earnings are. In most cases, they don't have really a written budget at all. They just have kind of a working tally. So I would say, at minimum, let's at least sit down and have, an overall budget that shows income, expenses. Let's look at those overall expenses, and then also create, some type of savings goal, whether that's through 50-30-20 or just a basic budget that shows income and expenses. The question I would have for you, whoever that may be, is really, what are your priorities? What is it that you're really aiming to accomplish? Regardless of your income fluctuating somewhat, we can figure out, what your budget should look like. But at the end of the day, is it written? Do we have a firm grasp of how we're spending funds? And then do you actually have priorities? A budget is one tool, but without having it aligned to priorities, that's a whole different conversation. So if you have any questions about how to structure that or do that, I'd be glad to help you. All you need to do is just give me a call.
Our next question is asking, can you recommend a good budgeting app?
A good budgeting app? Well, hey, we're working with the credit union today, so I'm going to say number one, that you check out take some time to just go back and look at the money management tool itself. When we think about doing this work, particularly if you're a credit union member, you're using your debit card, you have a whole range of things that you're purchasing now. You can go back into your account. You can, track your expenses right through your bank account, see what you are spending money on. There's where you look for those patterns. What are you doing with your money? And, using your banking tool, that's one approach. Again, there are a lot of services out there in the market. I've used Toshal, which has been around for a while now, but it kind of tracks expenses. But, besides doing that, I would say start here, start where you're at. We've got our bank account. We've got ways to track our expenses. And the money management tool is an outstanding way for you to do all that work align to your actual account. So rather than looking out into the market for a tool, I would say keep things simple and use the tools that are currently provided to you. There's a lot of work that goes into that to make certain that it meets members' needs. So, even if you're a non-member, what's being offered to you at your own bank or credit union. And certainly if you are a member, I would say start here.
Our next question's in regard to the budgeting handouts. And for everybody on today's webinar, there are a couple handouts under the handout section of your panel if you want to check those out. But Todd, this question is asking, is there a handout on the different budgeting types?
Okay, say that again, handout on the different budgeting.
The different budgeting types that we went over, like the 50, 30, 20. Yeah.
There is not a handout on the, other than just what's in the presentation slides. There's not necessarily handouts on that particular approach. The basic budget that we have, again, if you categorize your overall expenses, you can easily do that 50, 30, 20 by just taking your basic income, multiplying that by 0.20, 20%. That's going to give you some rough estimate. That's where one bucket of funds should be in that savings goal. So at minimum, the budget that I believe we have, it just is income minus expenses. But if you wanted the savings goal to be aligned to that 50, 30, 20, you can kind of use those percentages and kind of multiply that out to get, kind of a rough estimate of what your budget, does it fit within those spending categories. Zero sum, again, that's where it's so driven by you having specific, once you've categorized your overall expenses, if you were to take that static worksheet and you were to say, okay, I want zero sum, that's where you would be aligning a specific dollar amount towards that goal. And then with, again, applying just the basic worksheet, if you wanted to automate that process, you could take that concept and you would basically say, okay, now that I've got my income and expenses, I understand, roughly where I'm at. I've categorized everything. Here's my bottom line. This is what I have left in terms of discretionary income. That's where you could go back and say, okay, here are, 3 priorities that I want to meet. And I'm going to automate that process using the credit union tools. I create an account. Here's a dollar amount, and here's the date I'm going to do that. I'm going to set it and forget it. So you can apply it. You can apply the concepts, but I did not include necessarily within the presentation, other than the content, where you can get those types of budgets in worksheet form.
All right, thank you, Todd. So I know we're just another moment or so away from 1, so that is going to go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.